The story begins as we meet a boy named Rio, who's told by an angel that he died in an accident with Truck Kun, but he's going to be reincarnated. Rio wonders what he should do in his new life, but the angel tells him he's free to live however he wants, so he just wants to have a peaceful life. The angel tells him that he will be reborn in a new world called Phi, which is full of magic, and around 20% of people can cast spells with their natural elements. We learn that he's most compatible with water magic, and the angel tells him that since he wants an easy life, he'll be reincarnated in the forest of Rondo, where he'll have a house protected by a barrier to keep any monsters away. Rio is also given a starter pack with a fully stocked fridge that will last 2 months, so he doesn't have to worry about hunting for food, and he also gets a monster guidebook, which contains descriptions of the monsters he might find in the forest. He decides to test out his magic, so he goes outside and yells out an incantation, causing a sphere of water to appear in his hand, but he figures out that the incantation isn't necessary, because it's all based on his imagination, and as long as he can imagine it, he can let out the magic. He decides to relax and take a bath, but the water is too cold, so he tries to light a fire by rubbing sticks together. He gives up after a while, but he gets an idea from looking at the sun. He decides to first create ice by compressing the water by removing heat, and after concentrating for a while, he creates ice and shapes it into a magnifying glass to light a fire, and later takes a bath, thinking how easy his life will be with magic. The next day, he thinks about his future plans, and realizes that he needs to work on his combat abilities to survive in the world. He manages to shoot his water ball, but he knows that it can't do any damage, so he tries to create a water jet, but even after focusing on it, it's still pretty weak. He remembers the words of the angel who told him to rely on his imagination, and he practices until his water jets are decent, and he also learns how to make hot water. The next morning, he tries to create ice out of thin air, but when it falls on the ground without doing any damage, he doesn't lose hope and keeps practicing, until he's exhausted from the mana depletion and decides to take a break. But the next morning, he resumes his training, and after a few days, even though he still can't shoot his ice, he can create it almost instantly. He makes himself a spear and decides to try hunting, so he heads into the forest. He finds stones that he can use to light a fire, but he suddenly hears a growl, and sees a wild pig running toward him. He's frozen as he panics, but he dodges the pig at the last second, and it charges again for another attack. Rio quickly regains his composure and freezes the ground to make the boar slip, and then creates spikes that the boar runs into. Back at his place, he reads the guidebook and realizes that the lesser boar is the easiest one to fight in the forest. He skips through to the back pages, which is the section on the more dangerous monsters. He reads about dragons that can easily destroy cities alone, and the only way to survive is to run, even though there isn't much hope for survival. There's also a page that mentions fallen angels called Akuma, but there's not a lot of information about them. Rio decides to ditch his clothes and go back into the forest, but while he's not paying attention, an assassin hawk attacks him, and he remembers how they use their claws or beaks to attack, so he starts creating ice shields to protect himself. He uses his water jets to attack, but the hawk easily deflects them and dives straight towards him, so he quickly shields himself with ice. The hawk is knocked down, and quickly gets back up, but we see it lost one of its eyes, and it ends up flying away. Rio is relieved, but he ends up getting lost in the woods, and as he tries to find a way back home, he stumbles upon a glowing lake, and he finds a headless man and his horse. After that, Rio falls into a routine where he hunts different monsters, saves food, and practices his magic. He's sometimes defeated by the monsters, but he doesn't give up, and he soon gets strong enough to cut through even stone with his water jet. He goes back to the headless man, because he's been going to him to train his fighting abilities, but his guidebook doesn't have any information about him, so Rio thinks that he might be too advanced for the beginner level. He tries to attack, but he's no match, and even his ice shields don't protect him, so he's easily defeated. The headless man doesn't kill him, but instead creates a water sword and gives it to him, telling him to master it. After that, we see Rio is hunting like usual, when he's attacked by the same assassin hawk as before, but it looks darker and seems to have evolved. He creates a 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk easily breaks it, and also defends itself from his ice spikes. Rio uses more of his magic, but it's no use against the hawk's supersonic voice and wings. The hawk lets out lightning from its mouth, but Rio barely dodges it as his spear acts as a lightning rod. The hawk dives at him, but he takes out his sword at the last moment. He's able to cut through the hawk's sonic blast, and as it comes in for another attack, Rio finds an opening and stabs it in the neck. The hawk refuses to accept defeat, and Rio realizes it evolved just to fight him, but he's grateful since he also got the chance to improve. After killing the monster, Rio is going back home, when a dragon suddenly appears and starts talking to him through telepathy. He asks if Rio saw a hawk, and Rio starts to apologize, because he thinks the monster worked for him, but the dragon congratulates him, and says that he must be strong. The dragon compliments his sword, and explains that it belongs to the Fairy King, so Rio must have done something good to earn his favor. They end up talking for a while, until someone calls the dragon and he has to leave. The dragon introduces himself as Lewin, and says that they'll meet again, as Rio thinks about how interesting he was. Meanwhile, the angel realizes something strange, and sees that Rio was actually given a hidden trait of eternal youth, which he hasn't seen since the first hero he sent to the world 10,000 years ago. Rio goes down to the beach because he's craving seafood, but he sees a shipwreck and some people washed up on the shore. He rushes to check their pulse, but only one of them is still alive. We see that the ship was destroyed by a sea monster, and the boy wakes up in Rio's house. He gets up and starts exploring, wondering where he is, but Rio suddenly appears, and he's surprised since he didn't sense him coming at all. He's curious why Rio isn't dressed, but he doesn't ask because it would be rude. The boy is grateful to Rio for saving his life, and he introduces himself as Abel. Rio thinks he didn't do anything heroic, and he's sorry about the other people that died, but Abel mentions that they were smugglers, so it wasn't a big loss for him. Abel's stomach starts to growl, and Rio offers him a meal, during which he explains that he can't make any clothes, because he doesn't have any thread. Abel is curious why he can't buy it from the town, but stops himself, thinking it's too rude because Rio might not have the money. But Rio mentions that there aren't any towns or cities nearby, so having money is useless. Abel is impressed by how Rio is surviving alone, and he asks if he uses the knife on the table to hunt for food, but Rio explains it's more of a self-defense weapon, and for his hunts, he relies on his water magic. He fills a jug using his magic, and Abel is shocked, because even in the central provinces, only half the population is able to use magic, and Rio thinks that the angel lied to him, because magic seems more common than he was told. Abel wants to confirm something, so they both go back to the beach. On the way, Abel asks him why he doesn't use a staff, but when Rio mentions that he doesn't own one, Abel thinks he has made another mistake, since he probably can't afford one, so he says that if Rio comes into any trouble, he should let him take charge, because it's the least he can do, and Rio hesitantly agrees. They both arrive at the shipwreck and realize that the other bodies were either eaten or washed away, so Abel is lucky that Rio rescued him. Abel realizes that what he was looking for isn't there, so he now has to regroup with his friends in the town of Lune, and Rio tells him that he needs to head far north. Abel asks if he wants to join him as his guide, since he knows a lot about the area. Rio agrees, but before he leaves, he needs to take care of a few things first, and at night, he straps his sword and goes out, telling Abel that he needs to tell someone he'll be away for a while. Abel thinks that he might be paying his respects to a loved one, but Rio goes to the Fairy King, and tells him about his new adventure, while also thanking him for his training. Since it's their last session, he promises to fight extra hard and land some attacks, but even with all his strength, Rio isn't able to defeat him. Rio thanks the Fairy King again, and as he goes back to the lake, he uses his magic to give Rio a special robe. The next morning, Rio and Abel start their journey, and Rio says goodbye to his peaceful life for a while. As they go deeper into the forest, they encounter a wild boar, and Abel takes the lead. He charges it and uses his total impalement skill, which blows a hole through the monster's body. Rio is impressed, and Abel explains that people who don't have magic use combat skills. They continue their travel and stumble upon some lizard folk, but decide that it's not worth a fight, so they quietly leave and change their path, but Rio senses someone following them. Abel gets ready, but Rio wants to deal with them using his magic. The lizards come from behind the tree, and Rio easily shoots them all down with his ice. After the fight, Abel wonders how he can cast so many spells at once, because an old wind mage told him that they can only cast one spell at a time. Rio thinks that the difference might be in the type of magic, and conjures up some water for them to drink. They make their way in an open field, where Rio mentions that he has never seen the type of money that Abel has, as Abel explains that the central provinces mint their own money. While they walk, they accidentally go through a golem field, and Rio realizes that a real golem is different from what he had in his mind. Abel charges in and uses his total impalement skill, but it's no use since it can regenerate. Rio thinks of a new trick, and creates a 10-layer ice wall to instantly crush the golems. Only one golem remains, but it's not moving, and they both realize that the golems absorb energy from the ground, so when the monster was knocked up, it could no longer detect the ground. Abel and Rio see a giant hippo lying on the ground while wyverns attack it, and a monster war happens in front of them, which gets them excited. They both set up their camp, and Abel mentions the dungeon, which Rio wants to check out, so Abel promises that he'll take him after they reach Loon. They talk about dwarves and elves, and the night quickly passes by. Rio notes that they'll soon approach other humans after they cross the mountain, and Abel wonders where he got his information. Rio thinks about the interaction he had with Lewin, who told him about all the nearby areas and continents, but he tells Abel that some things shouldn't be shared. On their way, a giant monster flies above them, and they both barely survive by throwing food at it, but it leaves them shaken up, because there was no way they could have defeated it. Abel feels that something's wrong with the place, but Rio quickly defends his home, saying that maybe he just lacks the necessary survival skills. As they're talking, Rio realizes that the wyverns that attacked the hippo flew north, and as expected, he finds them feasting on another monster. Abel notes that they're too much to handle, because it would usually take 20 people to hunt them together, and even then, there would likely be casualties, but Rio doesn't listen, and believes they can pin them down. He heads off, forcing Abel to go after him, and Rio creates spears of ice that hold them down. Abel uses his total impalement to kill them, but they're ambushed by another flock of wyvern, but Rio is able to take them out. Abel takes a green gem from the monster, and when he sees another flock coming in, he rushes toward them, while Rio laughs at how battle-hungry he's become, and as they continue on, they finally reach the end of the mountains. Rio notes that he wouldn't have minded fighting more wyverns, so Abel tells him he shouldn't be wanting to run into them, but he's happy that they gathered so many magic stones. He notes how they have gone pretty far north, wondering where they now are, and Rio hopes they aren't in the Debui Empire, so Abel tells him the Empire would be much further north. Rio is relieved, and Abel wonders if he has an issue with the Empire, so he mentions that he just doesn't like its name. Rio notices a road, and Abel realizes something about the mountain that they just crossed, but he mentions that if they head west on the road, they will reach the town of Kaladi. As they both start walking, Rio confesses that he's excited about sleeping in a bed and relaxing, and Abel mentions that they should try the food in the town as well. They reach a tavern, and Abel advises Rio to register himself at the Adventurers Guild, so that he can get an identification card and travel into towns and cities without paying a fee. He explains that when they arrived, he acted as Rio's guarantor and paid a fee, so Rio jokes about owing him. Abel tells Rio that they can also sell magic stones and monster materials for a good price at the guild, but to use them on his own, he would need an alchemist. Rio is surprised to hear they have alchemy, but when his food arrives, he's even more shocked that they have curry. He thinks about how in other reincarnation stories, it would be impossible to find, or take years to recreate, so he can't believe it already exists in this world. He takes a bite, and he can't stop himself, so he orders again, hoping that Lynn also has curry. The next day, Rio is still raving about the curry, wondering if Abel has been keeping any more secrets from him, but he gets quiet and deflects the conversation. They keep walking until they reach a hillside, and Abel points out the town of Loon and the wheat fields. As they get closer to the gate, the guard spots Abel immediately and mentions how he was worried, because everyone thought he had gone missing, so Abel explains that Rio saved him. Abel pays the entry fee and shows his card, and Rio is happy for him that he's finally home. As Abel and Rio head to the guild, Abel explains that if a B-rank adventurer is endorsing him, he can start at either an E or D grade. Rio is impressed that he's such a high ranker, and Abel further explains that a higher rank means he can accept more quests that'll get him better rewards. They arrive at the guild, and when the adventurers see Abel, they're all happy that he's safe. Rio realizes how famous he is and wants to get out of his way, so he leaves, but he meets an elf outside. They both stop to look at each other, and the elf recognizes that Rio's robe belongs to the fairy king, and that the king must have liked Rio to give him such a gift, but she's in a hurry, so she hopes to meet him again. Abel takes Rio back inside and introduces him as the hero who saved him, and everyone welcomes and thanks him. Abel takes Rio to the receptionist, and hopes that Rio can start at a rank D, but she's surprised because no one from the Crimson Sword has ever endorsed anyone before, so he mentions that Rio is special. The receptionist explains that for the registration, they need a proof of strength, and Abel asks to talk directly to the guild master, so they wait in the meeting room. The guild master barges into the room and is relieved that Abel is alright. Abel notes that Rio is the real hero, so the guild master introduces himself as Hugh, and shows gratitude toward Rio for his bravery, but he gets awkward from all the flattery. Hugh asks for a proof of Rio's power, so Abel shows him the magic stones that he collected. He looks at the color and size of them, and recognizes that they belong to wyverns, so he asks if they had a whole army to defeat them. But Abel tells him that it was just the two of them hunting the monsters from the Malefic Mountains. He explains to Rio that when he saw the road to Kaladi, he recognized where he was, and Hugh tells them that legend has it, that no one has ever made it out of the mountains alive, and even adventurers avoid them, but he trusts Abel and agrees on Rio's endorsement. A bunch of other adventurers barge in, and they are also relieved to see Abel, so he apologizes to his friends Lynn, Warren, and Ria for worrying them. Hugh asks the receptionist to bring all the necessary equipment to his office, and asks Rio to follow him, but Abel interrupts him and says that he wants to show him something, so Rio should wait for him at the reception desk. Hugh explains to Rio that Abel's party, the Crimson Sword, is the most popular group in town, and Rio wonders if he can really be a D-ranker so easily. Hugh tells him that he loves Abel, but he also knows that Abel is not powerful enough to kill wyverns on his own, which means that Rio is talented, and he even has the physique of a warrior. The receptionist introduces herself as Nina and begins the interview. She asks about his element of magic and where he's supposed to live, but since he just got into the town, he can stay for 300 days at the guild after his registration. Nina asks if he knows about the dungeons, and as she sees him excited, she tells him they offer a course on the dungeons, and marks him for the next class. Rio puts his hands on the crystal for his registration, and his guild card is created, as Nina congratulates him for becoming an official member. When they leave, Hugh slumps into his seat because he's relieved, and he informs everyone else of Abel's return. Abel takes Rio to collect his payment, and tells him that he wants to buy him clothes and a staff, because every magician has a staff. Rio mentions he can use his magic without one, and has the option to use his sword, but Abel thinks that it's just a knife. Rio mentions that he still lacks knowledge on many fundamental things in the world, so Abel gives him a summary while shopping, and he learns that time is the same as Earth, with 24 hours in a day, and 7 days in a week. Measurements for clothes are in centimeters, and since there's also curry in the world, he realizes that someone else must have been reincarnated there and had a big impact. Abel comes out of the shop, and Rio wonders where they're headed to next, so Abel mentions a party, and they head back to the guild, where everyone celebrates Abel's safe return and Rio's bravery. The next day, Rio complains about drinking too much, and Nina introduces him to his roommates, Nils and Ito. When Nina leaves, Nils starts gushing about her, but Ito tells him he doesn't have a chance with her. Nina soon returns with another boy named Amon, and he tells them how his family died, so he came to Lynn to earn a living, and Rio introduces himself since they both have the dungeon class the next day. Meanwhile, Abel tells his friends about Rio's magic, but they think what he's describing is impossible. Lynn notes how magic can only be conjured around the caster, so conjuring ice from a distance and dropping it onto a monster doesn't make sense, but Abel is sure of what he saw. Lynn also reminds him that wyverns have a wind barrier around them that deflect magic, so it's not possible to kill them with magic, but Rio remembers that there was one person who was able to do something similar. She mentions the Inferno magician, who was said to be able to reduce a wyvern to ash with a single spell, and even destroy a whole army in an instant. Ria thinks that if Abel is telling the truth, then Rio is an incredible find for them, and she fears what will happen if he turns against them and teams up with the enemy empire, but Abel notes that that would never happen, because Rio would never be associated with the Debui name. After studying for 6 days, Rio and Amon's introductory course ends, and they learn about the essentials of dungeon exploration. They have to go to the first layer of the dungeon, and Amon is nervous, so Rio tries to calm him down. Rio asks the instructor about instantly traveling to layers they have previously cleared, so the instructor notes that it's possible in certain southern dungeons, but Lune's dungeon doesn't have that functionality. We learn that the town of Lune was built around an underground dungeon, and every few years, the Great Tidal Bore occurs, where the monster population grows rapidly and they push up to the surface, so the town built double walls to keep them from breaking through. Rio is fascinated by how the town protects itself, but Amon thinks that the tidal bore sounds dangerous, so the instructor tells him not to worry, because it's not likely to happen anytime soon. As they head inside, Rio notices that Amon is stressed, so he assures him that they'll be fine. The instructor tells them that the first layer is free from any monsters, but when Rio and Amon explore, Rio senses something up ahead. He tells Amon he'll pin down the monster using his magic, so he should use the chance to finish it off. A soldier ant crawls towards them, and Rio remembers reading about it in his guidebook, that the easiest way to kill it is by hitting the base of its neck. He uses his ice lances to pin it down, and he gets Amon to deliver the finishing blow. After killing the ant, Amon is more confident in himself, and Rio tells him to grab its magic stone. Amon wonders if it's allowed, so Rio notes that they're adventurers, and it's how they make their living. After that, Rio and the others celebrate, and Ito is impressed they were able to take down a soldier ant on their first time. Amon wants to go to the dungeon again, so Rio invites him to join him, since he's planning to go down to the 3rd level, but he remembers how the first level was meant to be clear, so he wonders what a soldier ant was doing there. Nils notes that there should only be bats on the 1st floor, and Ito mentions how ants have been spotted on the first 2 layers over the last few months. Abel suddenly appears, revealing that ants can dig their way up, and he introduces himself to Rio's new friends, who can't believe that they're meeting Abel of the Crimson Sword. Nils mentions that Abel is his hero, asking to shake his hand, and Abel tells them not to push themselves too hard, because surviving is an adventurer's first priority. Rio wonders what he's doing at the guild, so Abel tells him that he just came back from an adventure, but he's interrupted by the rest of his party, because they were supposed to go to the guild master first. Abel says he was just guiding the new adventurers, but Lynn tells Warren to grab him, and he's carried away. Lynn suddenly stares at Rio, but Ria calls her back, and they all go to find the guild master. Ria tells Lynn it's rude to stare, but she's just interested in Rio since he's supposed to be an incredible magician, and Ria can't deny that she's curious as well, so Abel notes that they will soon see how strong he is. The next day, Amon and Rio go back to the dungeon, and they use the same strategy where Rio pins the monsters down, and Amon finishes them off. As they take a break, Rio notes that Amon's fighting style is similar to Abel's, so he wonders who taught him how to fight, and Amon explains that he studied under a man named Kiro, who studied at one of the major schools in the royal capital called Hume. Rio is confident that Amon will be able to reach Abel's level, and Amon wonders how he knows about fighting with a sword when he's a magician, but Rio doesn't want to mention the Fairy King, and just says that he had a mentor a while ago. Amon is ready to continue exploring, but Rio tells him to take it easy and build his stamina, because even a skilled fighter like Abel practices his form every day. The next day, Rio goes to the library to find more information about alchemy, and the librarian recommends a beginner's guide and a cookbook to him. After reading for a while, he thinks that he needs his own copies if he wants to learn in more detail, but he's worried about the cost. As he thinks about it outside, there's suddenly a solar eclipse that makes everything dark. Rio notices that everyone else has disappeared, and gets a bad feeling. He's suddenly hit by a fire blast, but he manages to protect himself with an ice shield. A demon walks toward Rio, asking how a human has been mixed in the world, but thinks it doesn't matter, because she's going to get rid of him. Rio realizes that she must be an Akuma, so he thinks about running away, but realizes it's not possible since he seems to be in some kind of alternate dimension. The girl throws another fire blast at him, so he quickly shields himself, but she follows up with a wind lance at his heart. Rio survives thanks to his robe, and the girl recognizes that it's from the Fairy King, so she wonders what he did to earn his favor. Since her magic isn't working, she decides to use her sword, and Rio pulls out his own. They seem to be evenly matched, so the girl tries to use her magic, but Rio is faster and cancels it with an ice lance. Rio counterattacks with a barrage of ice, so the girl melts them with her fire and creates walls of stone to stop the rest, but Rio's water jets make it through and manage to land a hit. Rio charges in, but he notices that the girl's wound is healing and he ends up getting pushed back into a building. The girl is suddenly surrounded by water, and when it comes into contact with her skin, the water instantly boils and burns her. She quickly buries herself to get away, and when she's recovered, she emerges excited, because it's the first time a human has ever made her feel real pain. She notes that she would like to keep fighting him, but her time is up, since the eclipse is about to be over. She's sure they will face each other again, introducing herself as Leonore, and she suddenly disappears. Rio is relieved, but he realizes he needs to get stronger, because if it wasn't for his robe, he would have died. He decides to go and buy the books he wanted from the library, and he's surprised by how much money he had in his account. He remembers Abel telling him that the stones that they got from the wyverns were valuable, but he can't believe that they were really worth so much. He heads back to his room, and he's surprised that his friends aren't there. He hears a commotion outside, and sees the others beaten up on the ground. Rio uses his magic to take 4 of the bullies out, and Nils tells him about Dan, who was their previous roommate. Dan assumes Rio must be weak at hand-to-hand combat since he's a magician, so he charges at him, but Rio easily takes care of him, and he suggests they all take a hot bath together to relax. Ito heals his shoulder, and he can tell that Rio took a serious attack, telling him he was lucky the blow wasn't to his heart, so Rio reveals that the attack was meant to kill him, but he dodged it at the last second, and his friends wonder who he could have been fighting with. He tells them it's a long story, so he will tell them another time, because he just wants to relax for now. The next day, Amon and the others head back into the dungeon, and after defeating a goblin archer, Nils thinks they should head back, because goblin archers shouldn't be appearing on the 5th floor. He notes that they have already made enough money for the day, so they shouldn't push their luck, and Amon wishes that Rio was with them. Meanwhile, outside the town, Rio thinks about how Leonore was faster than him thanks to her wind magic, so he wants to improve his mobility. He thinks about using his water jet as propulsion, since it helps him to move underwater, but when he tries making ice, and using the jets to propel himself, he barely moves, so he becomes disappointed. He thinks about doubling the amount of water jets, but decides to head to the library first, to learn more about the Akuma and alchemy. Meanwhile, Lynn searches through all the spell books to find something similar to Rio's giant ice cube, but she finds nothing, even in the forbidden texts, so she thinks it must have been an original spell, but it would mean he's on the same level as the Inferno magician. The elf that Rio previously met named Sarah appears, and mentions that it's rare for her to see Lynn studying in the library. Sarah thinks about helping her, but mentions that she needs to go since she has a meeting. Back at the guild, Nils struggles to talk to Nina, so Ito tells her that they found goblin archers on the 5th floor. After Nina checks the magic stone that they got, she rushes to inform the guildmaster, who is also surprised, because goblin archers aren't supposed to show up until after the 10th floor, which could be a sign of the Great Tidal Bore, so he calls the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade party for an emergency meeting. As Abel arrives, he isn't thrilled to hear that the White Brigade was also called, because he has trouble talking to their leader Phelps. When they go to see the guildmaster, Phelps is already there, so Abel does his best to keep it together. Hugh tells them about the situation, asking them to investigate the dungeon, and Abel wonders if a goblin archer really appeared on the 5th floor. Hugh mentions the magic stone that Amon's party collected, so he's sure about the information. He asks them to verify signs of the tidal bore, since the last one was 10 years ago, and offers them 100 gold up front, and another 200 when they get back. Phelps wonders what they should do if they find that the tidal bore has begun, so Hugh tells them they are only going to get information, and should retreat to inform him so he can close the double walls and get the regional knights. The next day, Rio tells his friends that he's going to the Northern Library, since it has more advanced material on alchemy. Ito mentions that only deer anchors and above can enter, but it's not a problem for Rio. Amon asks about the forbidden texts that are kept there, which gets Rio excited, so Ito clarifies that only beer anchors can access them. As Rio arrives at the Northern Library, he finds it to be much larger, and realizes he'll need help locating the books he wants, since he can't directly ask about the Akuma, and while wandering around, he runs into Sarah again. Meanwhile, the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade prepare to enter the dungeon, but Abel gets a bad feeling, so he asks Lynn to use her wind magic to scan the first floor, and she finds that there are hundreds of monsters waiting for them, so Hugh declares an emergency and requests for all available adventurers to head to the dungeon. Back at the library, Sarah is glad to see Rio again, and wonders what he's doing there. He wants to ask about the Akuma, but realizes it would sound strange, so he tells her he wants to study alchemy. Sarah is surprised since alchemy is a difficult subject, and Rio mentions that he wants to create a golem, so she guides him to the books that might be able to help him. As they talk, we learn that it's rare for an elf to be living in a human settlement, but she's happy about it, since it led to her meeting him. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the monsters break through the gate, and hundreds of goblins start coming out. The adventurers hold the line, firing arrows and shooting fireballs at them, but there are just too many goblins, so Hugh becomes worried. Abel tells Len to conserve her mana, but they start to run low on arrows. Nils arrives just in time with more arrows, and delivers them a message from Hugh, telling them that they will need to fight the boss after the smaller goblins are defeated. After a few hours, the goblins have finally been taken care of, so Hugh orders the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade to find the boss. They're confronted by 3 goblin generals, and Abel realizes that there must be a goblin king in the dungeon. He decides that he and Phelps will each take a general, while Rhea and Sheena handle the third, since they need to kill them before the king arrives. As the battle begins, Abel manages to cut off the arm of one of the generals, so he thinks they will be able to deal with them. But he suddenly senses danger, and orders everyone to get down, as a powerful wind slash suddenly cuts through all the goblin generals, but everyone else is fine thanks to Abel's warning. The Goblin King emerges, so Abel and Phelps rush to attack it. Phelps's spear isn't able to get through the Goblin King's armor, but Abel uses his perfect shadow technique to dodge the King's attacks, and he manages to land a hit. Abel's attack isn't strong enough to kill the Goblin King, but he expected this, and calls out to Len, who has been charging up her wind bullet spell, and it's enough to take the king out. Everyone celebrates the victory, and Phelps is impressed that Abel predicted how things would go, and had Lynn charge up her spell from the beginning. Rio returns to the Adventurers Guild, but he wonders why everyone's celebrating, and we see Hugh in his office, where he wishes that he could drink with the others. But he's too busy with his paperwork, and he thinks the researchers from the capital will show up to investigate what happened, even though the dungeon will be sealed for a month. Rio realizes that everyone's celebrating the end of the Great Tidal Bore, and Nils talks about how cool Abel was when he fought the Goblin King. Lynn asks Rio if he can really create ice walls in the air, so he explains that he can, but notes that it's difficult to pull off, and it took him a while to learn the trick. She asks him if he used incantations to do it, but he mentions that they aren't needed to cast spells, and she's confused by his answer. Nils tells him the food is about to run out, so he leaves to grab something to eat, and Abel tells Len that he can use magic without incantations, but she can't believe that it's possible. After that, Rio wonders why Nils and his friends are working, so Nils explains that there are no quests available, since the dungeon is closed, and nobody needs help on the surface. Rio reveals that he's looking for an ore that he can use to practice alchemy, and Ito knows that he's talking about magic copper, but he knows that it's expensive. Rio notes that a handful of them is worth 50 gold, and he decides to hire the 3 of them, promising to pay them 4 gold each if they help him collect magic copper in an abandoned mine. He adds that he'll buy the magic copper they find for 25 gold each, and they think it's a great offer, so they decide to work for him. Rio returns to his room, but he sees a group of knights bullying a girl outside, and they're about to take her away, but Dan suddenly stops them. One of them pulls out his sword, and he threatens to kill Dan, but he suddenly crashes to the ground. He wonders what's going on, and tries to get back up, but he falls over again, and Phelps tells the knights to stop. He scolds the knights for their actions, and reveals that he's from the Heinlein family, telling them his father was the former commander of the Royal Knights. He tells them to leave, so they run away, and he praises Dan for protecting the girl, telling him to take her back to her friends. Phelps realizes that Rio was watching, and he wonders what happened to the knight, but Phelps explains that he just slipped. He reveals that Abel talked about Rio's magic, and mentioned that the Great Tidal Bore wouldn't have been a problem if he had helped them. But Sheena appears and tells him it's time to go, so he bids Rio farewell. That evening, Abel joins Rio for dinner, and he gives the waiter his order, but Rio wonders why he's alone, thinking he must be going to the pleasure district after their meal. But he tells Rio to be chill, since other people might be listening, so Rio thinks he's avoiding the subject, since he's in love with someone. He thinks it must be Ria, and Abel strongly denies it, but Rio thinks he's lying. He asks Abel why he's alone, so he explains that he needs Rio's help, and they walk around the district, as Abel reveals that he needs to deal with corrupt royal knights. But Rio sees suspicious men in an alley, and they decide to follow them, but they suddenly get ambushed by cloaked men, so Rio uses his falling eyes to knock them out. Abel realizes that they have an alchemical tool, and Rio wants to keep it, but Abel notes that they need it as evidence. He realizes that they're C-rank adventurers from a place called Jaclair, and he decides to hand them over to the guards, who will handle the investigation. Meanwhile, Phelps walks around the town, but the knights from earlier follow him, since they want to get revenge. But they suddenly realize that they can't move, and we see Sheena behind them, as she uses her Inferno spell to incinerate them. The next day, we see Hugh talking to a man named Clive, but he's angry since Clive wants to open the dungeon, and he's even demanding food and protection. But he explains that the Minister of Domestic Affairs has given them full authority over the team, so Hugh must follow their demands, but he notes that Clive is being unreasonable. A man named Arthur tells Hugh that they'll bring supplies from neighboring towns so that the guild's food stores won't be affected. But Clive tells Hugh that he still needs to reopen the dungeon, so he agrees to do it, but notes that the guild won't be responsible in case something bad happens to their team. He tells them they can hire adventurers for protection, but warns them that nobody knows the state of the dungeon, since a great tidal bore just occurred. Rio meets a girl named Natalie, who begs him to take her to the Adventurers Guild, since she needs to deliver a letter. She shows it to the Crimson Sword, and Abel realizes that the court magicians are asking for support while they investigate the dungeon. But he notes that the reason why the dungeon is supposed to be closed is because an A-rank party disappeared decades ago when they entered the dungeon after a tidal bore. Rio thinks they should just stay away from it, and he leaves to grab something to eat, while Natalie introduces herself to the others. Lynn realizes that she's from a family of great water mages, so she asks Natalie if she knows a spell that summons ice walls in the air, but she wonders if it's even possible to do that. So Ria reveals that Rio can do it, and Natalie can't believe it, while Abel notes that they should never fight Rio, because they'd be no match for him. But Abel tells Natalie to look for Rio if she's in trouble, and tells her where she can find him. The adventurers prepare to enter the dungeon, and Arthur shows Abel a mana detector, telling him that anything it detects will be transmitted to the analysis team. He tells his party it's time to move, and notes that they'll only go as far as the third layer, while Arthur mentions that he's counting on them. Meanwhile, Rio manages to find magic copper, and he pays Nils and his friends, who are happy with the reward. Ito is surprised that the dungeon is open again, but Rio notes that only deer anchors and above are allowed to enter, so Nils and his friends realize that they aren't included. 3 days later, we learn that the team has explored 7 layers, but they still have nothing to show for it, so Abel thinks they need to head deeper. They see a group of men from the Royal Central University, and Ria notes that they're operating under the theory that the monsters from the tidal bore came from below the 38th layer. At the Adventurers Guild, Hugh tells the E&F rank adventurers that he needs their help to get food from other towns. But Rio asks him about the color of the magic stones that were recovered during the tidal bore, so he reveals that they're all pale. Clive sees a strange opening in the wall, and he decides to call at the gate, ordering his men to examine it. So they use their equipment to measure the mana inside it, but everyone suddenly disappears, and Natalie realizes that the readings have vanished. The team realizes that they've been relocated, and Clive believes the gate teleported them away, thinking it's where the monsters from the tidal bore came from. He thinks the discovery will help him become the department head, but a man sees something in the distance, and they realize that there are monsters approaching. The analysis team detects mana on the 40th layer, but it suddenly disappears, and a mage from the College of Magic named Christopher asks them if something strange is happening in the dungeon. They don't tell him anything, and he knows that it's because they belong to different organizations, but he notes that people disappeared in the dungeon moments ago. He reveals that he was about to enter the dungeon with the adventurers he hired, but they suddenly vanished before his eyes, so the analysis team tells him about their situation. They tell him they got a reading from the 40th layer, so he realizes the adventurers were sent there, but he thinks it's impossible to save them, since no adventurer has ever made it past the 38th layer. He notes that even B-rank parties struggle beyond the 30th layer, but a man thinks the team will be okay, because they're with the Crimson Sword. Christopher notes that he sent a messenger to inform the guildmaster about this situation, so that he can take action, but Natalie suddenly runs off. Hugh learns about the situation, and he can't believe the investigation team vanished, so he decides to head to the dungeon entrance to confirm what's going on. We see Rio at the library, where he sees Sarah, and he tells her he wants to compare records of past eclipses and great tidal bores, but he doesn't know where to look. So she shows him around, as she notes that solar eclipses always happen before tidal bores, but it was never a total eclipse like the one that happened recently. He asks her what she knows about magic stones, so she notes that they become more vivid the longer a monster lives, but he tells her the monsters in the tidal bore had pale stones. So she realizes that they just spawned, but he thinks it's strange that the goblin generals and king just spawned all of a sudden, and he wonders if they were created artificially. He thinks she already knew that the stones were pale, and she admits that she already checked the records, revealing that the stones were also pale during the past tidal bores. He can't believe such records exist, and she offers to show them to him, telling him to follow her. We return to the investigation team, as Arthur wonders if their instruments are still working, so a man reveals that their mana detector is still active. Lynn mentions that the people on the surface might send help, but Arthur thinks it's unlikely, because he can sense something in the air. Rhea notes that it reminds her of the Sanctuary Square, which is the ultimate defensive magic that deflects spells and attacks, and Abel realizes that they're trapped in a barrier. She thinks it must be massive, since they can't see the boundaries, and he tells Lynn to use her probe magic to check what's in the area. So she casts the spell, and notes that there are thousands of humans nearby, but there are 50 life forms that she has never seen before. Arthur thinks it must be Clive and the others, so they decide to look for them, thinking it's best to regroup with them. Hugh learns that the investigation team is on the 40th layer, and Christopher wonders why they vanished, thinking it's dangerous to enter the dungeon since it could happen again. Hugh agrees with him, so they decide not to send a rescue team, and pray that everything will be okay. Clive's team is under attack, so they use their barriers to defend themselves, but they still suffer casualties, and he realizes that there are demons in the area. His men charge in, but the demons cut them down, as they realize that they don't stand a chance. Abel sees the demons, while Rhea notes that they're immune to magic, and they're even stronger than humans, but Arthur orders his men to surround them. Clive and his men hide in their barrier, and he thinks it's all over for them, but the demons suddenly get stabbed by elemental javelins. Rhea can't believe magic worked on them, because they're supposed to be immune to spells, but Arthur notes that it's not confirmed. He thinks the mages can overcome the devil's defenses if they work together, and they continue to attack with their magic, but he realizes that they'll run out of mana before they defeat the demons. Arthur notes that the mages are almost out of mana, so Abel mentions that they need to switch to melee combat, telling Warren to lead the charge. They rush forward, and take down the demons in their path, so Arthur realizes that the Crimson Sword lives up to their reputation. But Lynn suddenly collapses, and Rhea mentions that they're also out of mana, while Abel realizes that there are only 6 demons left. But Rhea notes that their leader is a demon prince, and it's so powerful that only a hero can defeat it. Abel decides to fight anyway, and he cuts down 2 of the demons, but the prince blasts his friends away, so he becomes worried. Rhea tells him they're okay, but the prince suddenly attacks him, and he realizes that he's no match for its speed and strength. The mages try to blast it, but their spells have no effect, and the demons overwhelm them with their projectiles. The prince charges in, so Abel uses his sword skill to slow down time, and he manages to parry its attack. He takes a swing at its head, but it dodges his attack and strikes back, so he falls to his knees, and the prince prepares to finish him off. But Rio suddenly appears, and he mentions that he's there to save Abel, telling him he needs to get stronger, since he was almost killed by the demons. Rio mentions that he'll take care of the prince, so Abel warns him that it's powerful, since it's an immature demon lord. But he notes that it's weak, and he uses his water jet to cut down the demons, as he approaches the demon prince and prepares to take it on. We see that Natalie told him about the situation, so he creates an ice cart and takes her to the gate, where he asks her why she looked for him. So she notes that Abel told her to find him whenever she needs help, and he's happy that Abel said that, telling her he will handle things. He rushes to the entrance, and the guards try to stop him, but he uses his ice wall to force his way in. He knows that the investigation team is on the 40th layer, but he doesn't want to take the stairs, so he uses his water jets to get through the layers. We return to the present, as Rio prepares to strike, and the demon prince charges in, but he manages to cut its head off. Abel is impressed by his move, but the prince takes its head and puts it back in place, so Rio realizes that the prince is tougher than he expected, but he still thinks it's weak. He decides to test its ability to regenerate, so he uses his water jet to cut it into pieces, and its magic stone shatters as it reaches its limit. Its body turns to dust, and Abel thanks Rio for saving them, promising to give him free food as a reward. Rhea is glad that Abel is okay, while Arthur introduces himself as an advisor to the royal magicians, and he thanks Rio for defeating the demons. But he reveals that people died during the fight, and he notes that the mages will collect their remains after they regain enough mana. Abel mentions that they should collect the devil's magic stones, and split the money they'll earn with the families of the fallen, but Rio is surprised to learn that they fought demons. Abel notes that they haven't shown up for hundreds of years, and Rio thinks about Leonore, wondering if Akumas are different from demons. He tells everyone he used his probe spell at layer 39, but he noticed something strange near the stairs, so he suggests checking it out on their way back. Abel notices that the devil's magic stones are black, and Arthur mentions that demons are said to appear at random, so everyone believes that they can use space-time magic. We see a hero named Roman, as he approaches an altar with his party, but Leonore suddenly appears, and they think she's the demon lord. One of them mentions that they used the altar to summon the demon lord, but she wonders why they would do that, so Roman tells her he needs to defeat the demon lord since he's the hero. She thinks he must be strong, so she's excited to fight him, but she instantly defeats him, and she's disappointed by how weak he is. His friends prepare to take her on, but she promises not to fight them unless they attack her, and tells them to save their hero. She takes a sacred jewel from the altar, and notes that the fight was boring, but she at least got something worthwhile. She reveals that she isn't the demon lord, and the adventurers don't believe her since she's OP, but she tells them they can defeat the current demon lord if they work together. They're confused hearing this, but she tells them about Rio, revealing that he's the only human who can keep up with her. So Roman realizes that there's someone stronger than him, and as she leaves through her portal, she tells him he still has a long way to go before he becomes the strongest human. We return to Abel, as he sees adventurers waiting for them at the stairs, and Arthur thinks they're with Clive, so Abel realizes that they weren't the only ones teleported away. They see a strange artifact on the ground, and Rio thinks it's the thing he saw when he used his probe spell, while Arthur realizes it was giving off mana. So he decides to keep it in his barrier bag, and notes that they should take it back as evidence. As they climb the stairs, Rio asks Abel about the curry shop in Loon, so he realizes that Rio wants to try it, and promises to treat him there. They return to the surface, and Hugh is glad that they made it back alive, but he wonders why Rio ignored the guards and rushed into the dungeon. Arthur notes that he saved their lives, and Hugh is surprised hearing this, so Arthur tells him they should talk in the tent. He tells Hugh everything that happened, and he thinks Abel saved everyone, but Arthur reveals that he was almost killed by the demon prince. He notes that Abel would have died if Rio didn't intervene, revealing that he easily defeated the demons, but Arthur thinks the nobles will bother him if they learn about his powers. So he suggests leaving no official record of Rio's actions, and Hugh decides to go with his plan, since he wants to stay on Rio's good side. The next day, Rio walks around the city, and he suddenly smells curry, so he heads to a nearby shop, where he sees Sarah. He tells her he went there since he smelled curry, so she mentions that he's in the right place, and they both give the waitress their orders. Sarah asks him where he lives, so he tells her he's staying in the guild dorms, which is a place for rookies, but he notes that he ranked up to D when he registered. The waitress gives them their food, and they enjoy their meals, so they both have a good time. Rio wonders why he doesn't see Sarah in the guild, so she reveals that she's been working outside the capital as the swordsmanship instructor of Loon's Knights. She invites him to have a mock battle with her, and they prepare to fight in the arena, as she notes that she can sense his frustration since he isn't happy with his last battle. They start fighting with their swords, and the knights are amazed that Rio can keep up with her, while she notes that his skills are impressive. But she decides to fight seriously, and he tries to defend himself, but he gets overwhelmed by her speed. She manages to break his sword, so he admits defeat, but she still thinks he's amazing, since he was able to block her attacks while she was using her wind robe to increase her speed. She wonders why he's a skilled swordsman, so he reveals that the Fairy King taught him everything he knows, and she thinks the Fairy King must like him, since he decided to help him out. But a maid named Rolita reminds her that it's time to give lessons, so Sarah tells her to show Rio home, telling him she had a good time. Rolita takes Rio to the gate, where he runs into Hugh, who tells him to join him in the carriage. Hugh reveals that Arthur told him everything, so he thanks Rio for saving the investigation team, but notes that he needs to punish him for ignoring the guards at the dungeon. So he gives Rio a job as punishment, telling him to escort merchants to a place called Whitnash, and return to Lynn afterwards. Nils tells Rio that his hometown has issued a hunting request, and he wants to accept it, but he isn't qualified since it's a D-ranked quest. We learn that Nils and his friends are still E-rank adventurers, so he wants to form a party with Rio to complete the quest, and Amon notes that there are goblins and skeletons around the village. Ito notes that it's strange, since they don't usually stay in the same place, but Rio wants to see the skeletons, so he decides to accept the quest. They speak with Hugh, who reveals that the quest came from a place called Kaladi, but it was forwarded to Lynn since no one was able to complete it. He notes that two parties have accepted the quest, but they both failed, and the second party reported that the villagers didn't want to cooperate with them. He tells Nils and his friends to be careful, since the first party returned badly injured, and he notes that Rio's escort job is a few days away, so he still has time to complete the quest. Rio and his friends reach the village, and the people greet Nils, who mentions that he's glad to be back. He talks to the mayor Bolin, who's happy to see him again, telling him he has grown, but he notes that he's just been away for a year. He introduces his friends to Bolin, who realizes that they're there to complete the request, and Nils asks him why the villagers didn't cooperate with the second group. He explains that it's because the first party took the fight to the eastern woods, which is supposed to be a forbidden area, so when the second party showed up, the villagers immediately chased them away. Rio wonders why people aren't allowed in the eastern woods, so Nils explains that it's because of the village's secret, telling them they can't enter without the council's approval. That evening, Nils's brother Niloy reveals that Nils always wanted to leave the village, but their parents passed away, so Nils had to stay in their house to take care of him until he turned 18. Nils's friends realize that he's a caring person, and he suddenly joins them, revealing that the council gave them permission to hunt. He reveals that the village has two secrets, and notes that the first one is their guardian beast, which lives in the eastern woods, so Rio is curious, wondering if it's possessed by an evil god. Nils reveals that the second secret is their shrine, but he explains that the elder will tell them about it, so they need to wait until tomorrow. The next day, Bolin shows them the area where he found the goblins, and they see footprints on the ground, so Nils thinks the goblins' den must be nearby. Rio senses 10 goblins approaching, and notes that they'll be there in 5 minutes, so he suggests setting an ambush for them, and following the survivor back to their den. We see the goblins walking around the woods, when Rio suddenly freezes them, and his friends take them out. One of them runs back to their den, but Rio uses his ice bind to freeze all of the goblins, and his friends finish them off. A goblin general comes out of the cave, and Nils thinks they can't defeat it, so he suggests running away. But Rio restrains it with his ice chains, and slams it to the ground, and Nils finishes it off. They make their way back to the village, where they meet the elder Nasu, who praises them for defeating the goblins, and she leads them through the eastern woods. Ito asks her about the charm on her staff, wondering if it's the crest of the Earth Mother Goddess, and she's impressed that he was able to recognize it. Rio asks him about the goddess, so he reveals that she belonged to the Pantheon of 7, but Nasu notes that everyone now worships the goddess of light, so the other 6 have been forgotten. But the elders of the village still worship the Earth Mother, and she reveals that she can still use healing magic, but her spells are different from the ones used at light temples. She notes that unlike other mages, the servants of the Earth Mother don't need incantations, and she wonders why everyone thinks they're needed to cast spells. They reach a cave, where Nasa calls the guardian beast, and a giant wolf appears, but Rio is disappointed since it's not evil. It finds him interesting, so it introduces itself as Kuzan, and Nasa can't believe it gave him its name, since that has never happened before. Kuzan reveals that it's a relative of fairies, and it has taken a liking to Rio because of his presence, but he wonders why fairies like him. It reveals that there are skeletons around the shrine, and it trapped a powerful monster inside, promising to set it loose after they defeat the skeletons. Ito uses his light magic to eliminate the skeletons, and they open the shrine, realizing there's an arch skeleton inside. Ryo creates ice hammers for his friends, and gives the signal to Kuzan, so it removes the seal, and the skeleton charges out. But Ryo covers the ground with ice, which causes the skeleton to slip and fall, and his friends smash it while it's down. It tries to get back up, but it falls once again, and Nils delivers the finishing blow. They enter the shrine, as Nasa reveals that she's never been there before, but she realizes that a part of the jewel is missing. She notes that it used to shine, but it's suddenly turned dark and shattered, and she wonders if the goblin's cave received power from the shrine, thinking it must be the reason why goblins started to spawn. So she decides to block the cave, thinking it will stop them from spawning. After they leave the village, they realize that it's been nearly 300 days since they became adventurers, so they can no longer stay at the dorm. Nils mentions that after they move out, he'll find a place to live with Ito, and he invites Amon and Ryo to join them. Amon immediately agrees to live with them, but Ryo notes that he needs time to think about it, since there are still things he needs to consider. At the Adventurers Guild, Hugh tells Abel to serve as his proxy at the Whitnashport Festival, explaining that he usually sends Phelps to do it, but he's busy with his other duties. We see two mages fighting in an arena, but their lieutenant Oscar suddenly interrupts them and tells them to listen to their commander Fiona. She notes that she'll be leaving with Oscar for Whitnash, and they won't be back for 2 months, but she expects everyone to improve while they're away. We see Ryo in the middle of his escort mission, and he's surprised to see Nils and his friends, who happen to be on the same job, and they don't know what to expect since it's their first escort mission, so they're glad to have Ryo with them. He wonders why they need to spend 9 days in Whitnash, so Nils explains that it's because of the Open Port Festival, which takes place every 5 years. Their group reaches Whitnash, and a merchant thanks the adventurers for escorting him, telling them to enjoy their stay, since they'll be free for 9 days. Ryo decides to join Nils and his friends, and they have dinner together, as they realize that the food there is amazing. The next day, we see Oscar as he's about to enter Whitnash, but his friend Jurgen tells him that they're stuck in line, since a carriage ahead of them is having issues with their papers. Jurgen asks for his thoughts about their journey, so he notes that he doesn't know what the Imperial Majesty is up to, but thinks he wants to get rid of his enemies while Fiona is away. We learn she's the Emperor's favorite daughter, because she's a talented warrior, and Oscar thinks he doesn't want her to see the dark side of his rule, so he wants to purge the nobles who oppose him. But Oscar explains that it's just a theory, and notes that he'll focus on guarding Fiona. The nobles gather in a mansion, where they see the Empire's third Prince Conrad, who thinks Fiona must be exhausted, since she isn't used to social gatherings. He tells her to rest while he handles everything, and he starts talking to the other nobles, while she returns to her room, where her servant Marie realizes that she's exhausted. So she helps her undress, and Fiona mentions that she's glad Conrad allowed her to leave, since she doesn't like spending time with other nobles. She doesn't know how he handles all the guests at the party, and Marie reminds her that her talent for sword and magic is unrivaled, but Fiona thinks it's the only thing that makes her stand out. Ryo and his friends attend the festival, where they notice that Abel is one of the special guests, and Nils is attracted when he sees Fiona. But Ito tells him she's out of his league, since she's an imperial princess. Lynn arrives with the others, and Ryo asks them why Abel is a special guest, so Rhea explains that he's acting as Hugh's proxy until he arrives. Lynn notices that the guests are surrounded by a wind barrier, and mentions that the Lord of Whitnash's treasure must be its source, but she heard that they rarely use it since it isn't efficient. She knows that Fiona is a commander of the Imperial Magic Division, so she wonders if Oscar is also there, but Ryo wonders who he is. So she explains that he's the Inferno Magician, and Rhea notes that she doesn't want to get on his bad side, since his skills are legendary. Lynn's group leaves to walk around the festival, but Oscar almost bumps into Ryo, so he steps back, and Nils tells him to be careful since the place is crowded. Oscar starts walking around the town, and he mentions that he doesn't like crowds, but Jurgen reminds him that Fiona wants to try the food at the festival. So she'll cry if they return empty-handed, and he tells Oscar what food she wants to eat. Abel talks to Conrad, who recognizes him as Hugh's proxy, and tells him he looks familiar, but Abel mentions that they've never met before. He notes that he met Fiona, so he wonders if Oscar is also there, but Conrad explains that he isn't allowed to talk about him, and tells Abel he needs to go. We see Fiona resting in her room again, and she mentions that she hates acting like a princess while everyone's staring at her. Oscar and Jurgen arrive with her food, and Jurgen reminds Oscar that he almost bumped into Rio, so he notes that it was a close call, but they only avoided each other since Rio was quick to react. He uses his magic to heat the food, so Fiona thanks him and calls him her master, but he tells her not to call him that in front of everyone. We see Amon and Ito trying an archery challenge, but they both fail to hit their targets, and Rio tells Abel to give it a try. He decides to go for it, and he hits the bullseye, so everyone thinks he's amazing. He sees Rio with her friends, and he wonders why they're carrying a lot of stuff, so she explains that women have certain needs. Lynn reveals that she's angry, since he promised to go out with her but didn't show up, and she takes him away. Sarah visits Nina, and tells her she's looking for Rio, since she wants to talk to him about something she found in the library. But Nina reveals that he left to complete a quest, and notes that he won't be back for a while, so Sarah becomes sad, wondering when she'll see him again. We see Rio watching the people prepare for a race, but Nils isn't happy to see Dan, and they start to argue, while Ito notices a priest named Sasha, realizing she's in Dan's party. The race begins, and Fiona wonders why the adventurers have a separate race, so Marie explains that they're allowed to attack each other, but Jurgen notes that using magic is against the rules. Nils and Dan fight during the race, and they're about to reach the finish line, but their weapons break, and they take their companions' pals to continue the fight. But they end up breaking again, so they start punching each other, and Rio notes that they would have won if they had just crossed the bridge. They start to grapple, but it causes their boats to tip, and they both fall into the water. Their teams lose the race, but they receive a special award for entertaining the crowd, and they fight over that as well. After that, everyone sees a strange ship called the Rain Shooter, and Hugh explains that it uses wind and water magic to move. Nils thinks it's amazing, and Hugh wishes that it would perform well, since they had to spend billions just to build it. Ito checks a weapons store, and he looks at a crossbow, thinking he can use it to support his friends while they're on the front line. The shopkeeper shows him a repeating crossbow, and as he gives it a try, he realizes that it's perfect, so he decides to buy it. That evening, Abel attends a party as Hugh's proxy, since he has already returned home, and Conrad introduces Abel to Fiona, revealing that she's his little sister. Abel doesn't feel safe since he isn't carrying his sword, but he thinks everything will be okay, since a barrier is protecting everyone. We see the treasure that's being used to create the barrier, but the person guarding it realizes that it's no longer channeling mana, and the barrier disappears. He suddenly gets attacked by a group of men, while Fiona realizes that something's wrong, and there's suddenly an explosion in the garden. In a flashback, we see Oscar with his master Rasan, who teaches him how to forge a sword, and Oscar thinks he's amazing, since he's been working in the forge for hours, but he still isn't tired. Oscar returns home, and he uses his magic to start the fire for his mother, so she thanks him for his help. Rasan forges 3 swords, and he tells Oscar's father San that he wants to give Oscar the smallest one since he's about to turn 7. Rasan notes that it's ideal for practicing, since it's lighter than an ordinary sword, and Oscar thanks Rasan for giving it to him. San uses his bow to kill a boar, and everyone eats it for dinner, but a man tells San that a large group of bandits will attack them in a few days. San thinks about running away, but he knows that they have nowhere to go, so they have no choice but to fight. When they see the bandits approaching, and they use their bows to shoot them down, but the bandits charge in, so San tells Oscar to hide while he fights them. The bandit Bascana takes out the archers and opens the gate for his men, who rush into the village. We see Oscar hiding with his mother, but Bascana manages to find them, so his mother tries to protect them, but he easily cuts her down. Oscar launches a fireball, but Bascana slices through it and knocks him down, telling him he has a fine sword, but he isn't skilled enough to use it. Bascana prepares to finish him off, but San arrives to save him, and he realizes that his wife is dead, so he becomes angry and charges at Bascana. He escapes through the door, and San tries to follow him, but he suddenly gets hit by arrows, and Bascana finishes him off. He takes San's sword, but his companion Posh tells him they need to go since a pack of wolves is approaching. They eat the villagers' remains, and Rasan arrives, realizing that Oscar's parents have been killed. He tells Oscar they need to escape, but he mentions that he wants to die, since his parents were murdered in front of him. Rasan tells him he needs to live, since his parents died to protect him, but they realize that the wolves are outside, so Rasan tells him to escape to the river. Oscar runs away, and a wolf chases after him, but Rasan takes it out, and he stays behind to fight the wolves while Oscar escapes. He manages to reach the river, but the wolves are about to catch up to him, so he panics and falls into the water. He later wakes up in a mansion, and he meets an old man named Luke, who reveals that a villager found him at the edge of the river. Oscar remembers what happened, so he starts crying, and after he calms down, Luke mentions that he must be blessed by the fire god since he has red hair. He tells Luke that he has nowhere else to go, so he allows Oscar to stay there, and promises to educate him after he recovers. He mentions that he wants to learn how to fight with a sword, since he wants to get stronger, but after he returns from his training, he sees that the mansion is on fire. So he searches for Luke, but he finds that he was killed by a bandit, so he loses it and charges in. He manages to injure the man, but he grabs onto Oscar and stabs him through the chest, telling him he still isn't skilled enough to use his sword. He realizes that the bandit is Boscana, and Posh tells him they need to go, since the nights are approaching, so they leave Oscar to die. But he somehow manages to survive, as his hair is now white, thinking he needs to get revenge on Posh and Boscana. We return to the present, as Abel talks to the Lord of Whitnash, who reveals that his mansion is full of soundproof artifacts, so no one outside can hear them. He tells Abel that he wants to have an introductory course for adventurers in Whitnash, just like the one they have in Loon, and Abel thinks it's a great idea, since it helps rookies survive in the dungeon. The Lord notes that he has already discussed the details with Hugh, but he has an additional proposal, saying he wants their instructors to go through Lynn's course, so that they'll become familiar with it. Meanwhile, Oscar refuses to eat anything, since he wants to be ready in case Fiona gets attacked, but Marie thinks everything will be okay, since the garden is protected by a wind barrier. The nobles panic as the garden starts burning, and Fiona wonders who attacked them, but she realizes that Conrad is injured. So she protects him with a barrier and starts healing him, but he tells her to stop, since she needs to conserve her mana. She sees a place where they can take cover, and they decide to go there, but the assassins enter the garden and slaughter the nobles. Conrad thinks the manor has been locked down, since no one's coming to their aid despite the commotion, and he tells her to summon her knights. So she uses her magic to give them the signal, and they realize that she's in trouble, so they run to the garden. Conrad thinks Oscar will take care of everything when he arrives, but the assassins find them, and Conrad realizes that they're the targets of the attack, so he tells Fiona not to hold back. Oscar arrives at the manor, and he takes out the assassins in his path, but he tells his companions they need to hurry, since Fiona is in the inner garden. We return to Conrad, as the assassins charge in, but Conrad uses his earth magic to impale them. He hears someone chanting, and he recognizes the spell, so he tells Fiona to use her strongest barrier, as a mage casts their bullet rain. She manages to summon her barrier just in time, but Conrad hears the mage chanting again, and he doesn't recognize the spell. She notices that the floor he's standing on is about to explode, so she pushes him back, but the mage activates his volcano spell, and she gets caught in the explosion. Oscar and the others arrive at the garden, and he sees her get blown away, so he remembers the people he lost in the past. She tells him to look after her brother, so he orders his companions to protect Conrad, while he goes after her. We see Nils and his friends at the beach, and they wonder why Rio isn't back yet, since he just left to buy food. They suddenly see the explosion, and they realize that Fiona is about to fall to her death, so Nils catches her before she hits the ground. He realizes that she's still alive, but Ito runs away as he sees assassins, so Amon fights them with his sword. Ito uses his crossbow to shoot one of them, while Amon cuts the other one down, and Nils realizes that Fiona is their target. So he suggests taking her to a safe place, but Oscar suddenly appears, and he tells them to stay away from her. Meanwhile, Rio wonders about the explosion, wondering if it was a firework, but there are men that rush past him, and knock his food to the ground. Ito and the others don't trust Oscar, so he tries to take them out, and Ito protects them with a barrier, but he instantly reaches his limits. Oscar tells them they aren't worthy to touch Fiona, and Ito continues to use his barrier, but it gets shattered and they all get hit. Ito collapses, and Oscar prepares to finish them off, but Rio arrives just in time. He sees the state of his friends, so he asks Oscar what he's doing, but he continues to attack. Rio easily counters him, so Oscar decides to deal with him first. Rio summons his 10-layer ice wall to defend himself, and Oscar is shocked that there's someone on his level. Rio wonders if that's all Oscar can do, and he attacks him from all sides with his ice. Oscar creates a tornado to defend himself, burning Rio in the process, but we see that he protected himself, and he prepares to attack with his sword. Oscar draws his own sword, clashing against Rio, but they seem to be evenly matched. As they prepare to get more serious, Abel suddenly appears and tells them to stop. Rio threatens to freeze him if he gets in the way, but Abel recognizes Oscar as Fiona's lieutenant. He explains that he's the guildmaster's proxy, and that Rio and his friends are just adventurers who had nothing to do with the attack on the Lord's manor. Oscar starts to realize the situation, but Rio still wants to kill him because of what he did to his friends. He even threatens to freeze Fiona, so Oscar loses it, and attacks him with his strongest magic, but Rio uses his water jets and completely counters it. He asks Abel if he can finish Oscar off, but he tells him it would be an international incident that could lead to a war. He tells Oscar he was sent by Conrad to ensure Fiona's safety, and he tells them that there's no point to their fight. He knows that Rio is angry, but he begs him to stand down. Rio wonders if Abel would be able to stop if Rio was the one who got hurt, but he notes that she wouldn't want a war either. Rio prepares to continue, but Abel gets in the way, and he wonders why Abel didn't move, so he notes that he doesn't want for Rio to be the reason for a war, and he was willing to give his life to stop him. So Rio finally listens to him, putting away his sword, and Fiona is handed over to Oscar. After that, Ida was happy to learn that he was healed by Rio, and Rio is glad that they're all okay. Abel reminds him about the trouble he caused, but he notes that after Fiona woke up, they were able to clear up the situation, and Oscar even apologized. He can't believe Rio was so chill after he almost started a war, but he tells Ito and the others that Fiona wants to thank them since they saved her. They're excited about getting a reward, but Abel notes that Rio wasn't included, so he pretends he doesn't mind, and notes that he only dealt with the weird fire mage, while Abel can't believe he's talking about the Inferno magician like that. They're all glad to be done with their first escort mission, but Rio notes that it's not over until they get back safely, so they all prepare to head back to Lune. Meanwhile, we see Sarah in the library, and she wonders when Rio will be back. She thinks about how she only met him a month ago, so she wonders why she's always thinking about him. She heads to the bar, but she suddenly sees that he's back, so she rushes over to him. She ends up taking him to the forbidden section of the library, telling him he would normally need to be at least B ranked to get in, and she shows him notes that she found about alchemy. He finds it interesting, and apologizes for making her wait, but she tells him not to worry. We learn that anything on paper is able to be copied using a transcribing spell, but since the notes are on a sheepskin, the spell doesn't work. Rio is surprised to learn about the spell, and Sarah can't believe that even though he's so strong, he doesn't know about such a basic spell. After he makes a copy of the notes, he wonders how Sarah can afford the entry fee for the library since she's always there, so she mentions how she works for the Lord and he waived the entry fee for her. Rio thinks she's lucky, and she notes that it's how she was also able to get him permission to go into the forbidden area. Rio starts to wonder how old she is, so she reveals that she's 200, which surprises him since she's so pretty, and she gets embarrassed hearing this. Sarah takes him to a transcriber, but they run into Abel, and Rio jokes that it's a surprise to see him actually working. Abel wonders how they know each other, so Rio mentions that Sarah is like his teacher, but he notes that he's in a hurry, but Rio asks to speak to him later. As they prepare to head in, Sarah asks Rio about the way he talks to her. She notes that she thought that he was always a bit nervous talking to her since she's B ranked, but after seeing how casual he was with Abel, she wants him to treat her the same way, and she makes him start by making him call her his friend. After that, Rio goes to see Abel, who wonders what he wanted to talk about. He notes that Abel never treated him to the meal that he promised, so he tries to make an excuse, but Rio asks for his help with finding a place to live instead. He notes that his friends are all moving in together, but since he plans on doing experiments with alchemy and magic, he wants a place with a big yard. He notes that he has plenty of money after selling the magic stones from the wyverns, and he imagines buying a noble's estate. But it turns out not to be possible to buy a noble's property since he's of low birth, so Abel asks his associate if there are any other suitable options, and he mentions a farmhouse that's just outside the town. They go to check it out, and Rio thinks it's exactly what he was looking for. The man thinks he can't afford it since it's 50 million, but Rio instantly agrees to take it. We see the angel as he thinks about how Rio just wanted a peaceful life. But seeing everything that he's been through so far, he thinks Rio has a much more interesting path ahead of him.